Welcome back to another episode of the Meal Prep Monday podcast. I'm your host and founder of Prep Dish, Allison Schaaf. We are back today with another interview, this time with dietitian and eating disorder expert Adrien Paczosa. She's also a close personal friend of mine, so it's fun to have her on the podcast. We met back in Austin back in 2010 probably, and have been in a monthly mastermind together over the past 5+ years, but was really wanting to bring her on to talk about this topic, eating disorders, and we go into it with kids, teens, even adults, and how to recognize it in, friends that you may see some issues. So just a really important topic, and I'm excited to bring it to the podcast today. Before we get into the interview, a reminder that if you have not tried out our time-saving meal prep meal plans, we have a free trial set up for you. But before I tell you about that, I want to share what one of our subscribers, Joanna, had to say about Prep Dish. Joanna says, I'm single and live by myself, so cooking for one is my hardest thing. Finding motivation to go to the grocery store, make time for food prep, and be diligent to actually cook the food I have at home. I'm so thankful that I found Prep Dish. I've already shared it with many friends because having the meal plan scratched off my list of things to do is incredibly valuable. Thank you for sharing, Joanna. And I like hearing from subscribers and knowing that there's a wide variety of ways that people use Prep Dish. I know a lot of these subscribers that I share are busy moms or families, but there's a lot of different ways that people can use Prep Dish in their life. If you would like to try out the meal plans, you can go to prepdish.com/MPM, short for Meal Prep Monday, for a 2-week free trial. It's the best way. Just try it out free for 2 weeks, see if it's a fit and how it helps to save time and help you get delicious, healthy food on the table each night. Okay, with that being said, I am excited for you to listen in with my interview with Adrien Paczosa. Hey everybody, I am here with Adrien Paczosa, a dietitian and also a close friend of mine. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. She specializes in eating disorders, and it's a topic we haven't really talked about here on this podcast, but so many of you having kids, whether it's a 10-year-old or a 22-year-old, I think this is a topic that it's important to, be knowledgeable about. So very excited to welcome Adrien to the podcast. Adrien, why don't you just start off by telling listeners a little bit more about yourself?
Well, super excited to be here. Like Allison said, dietitian. I have been a dietitian for a few decades, and fell into the world of eating disorders. I thought I was going to do sports, all of that, but really, truly have a passion for eating disordered eating, because there's so many things that kind of compile into an eating disorder, our sense of self, our sense of well-being, all of these things, and we tend to make food the issue when, bless its little heart, food is so much fun. As I'm sure Allison has touched all that. But that's kind of where it spawned from an eating disorder, and have helped build Nourish, which is a national telehealth nutrition company, which you get to see a registered dietitian that's covered by your insurance. So really, truly making access to dietitians more affordable, more accessible. And so I am so excited to talk about eating disorders, which sounds so weird to say that I love eating disorders, but it is true.
Well, I mean, I love that you're out there having the conversation because I think it's one of those topics that sometimes people don't want to have, or it makes people uncomfortable. And all of us out there, moms, friends, family members, it's important to kind of be aware of, this is an issue. So I thought maybe we'd start more with language around food and then move into like, hey, what are some signs that things might be going wrong and what can we do? So starting with language, what are some things that we need to be aware with about when we're talking about food?
I think that it's interesting. I was thinking about this when you asked this question earlier today, and I was like, there's no like, don't say this, say this. There's no clear black and white, which I wish there was. It would make momming so much easier with food. It's very much how the kiddo, the person perceives that interpretation. So the difference between saying, oh, don't eat something, versus don't eat something and then there's a consequence. So like, oh, if you eat marshmallows. And I'm just going to use marshmallows probably today because who knows, they're funny. Don't eat marshmallows because you'll gain weight. So if a kid eats the marshmallow, oh my gosh, I'm going to gain weight. And then I might not be loved by my mom. Even though the mom never said that, or the caregiver or whatever, I'm just going to use mom today, that can be perceived in the kid's brain. So interestingly enough as well, eating disorders, it's a genetic disorder. It's a genetic mental health disorder. And so the saying is, genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger. So if there's a family history of eating disorders, disordered eating, and we just are growing up in a diet-centric culture or a weight-centric culture, there's more risk that eating disorder will present.
Wow, that just even hearing you say those words though of that little kid and thinking through like how they might interpret that and how strong our words can be. That's so
It's terrifying. Oh my gosh. Every single time I say something, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to screw up my kid? And they're going to, yeah. So you have the right thoughts. And we might, and that's okay. There's no good, bad, right, wrong. I think it's just being very mindful of also how you view yourself and what you say about your body, your food is very much going to be picked up by the kids of like, oh, mommy can't eat that because she needs to lose weight, or oh, daddy's not eating that because he needs to lose weight. They don't care. Kids do not need to know if you need to lose weight, gain weight. They do not need to know. Oh yeah, daddy's just doesn't prefer that. I always like to use prefer or not prefer as opposed to like, don't like. Kids will choose their own words of yucky or I don't like that. But I think always just really keeping your own personal stuff separate than your kiddos is so important.
Well, as with so many things in parenting, I think our kids are constantly challenging us to be a better person. I personally actually love that about my kids. I think they really help to keep you accountable. One thing I heard the other day was someone who was talking about they are dairy intolerant and they're very intentional how they phrase that with their kids when they're not having ice cream. It's not, they were saying how they kind of phrase it of like, well, this doesn't agree with mommy's tummy, but it's fine for you to have. And I know a lot of our listeners, because of our meal plans have, gluten-free, dairy-free, I'm gluten-free. So I've tried to be intentional too with how I word that for my kids. My kids do eat gluten and I don't want them to think it's this bad, so how do parents deal with that if they do have an allergy or intolerance, or if one of their kids have an allergy or intolerance? How do they word those so that where it's not so scary?
I think you did a great job. I think just being completely honest, like mommy has an allergy or as an intolerance, it makes mommy's tummy really sick. You are safe to eat this, and like letting them know that they're safe. It is okay to eat it. Mommy eats other things that are okay and safe for mommy to eat. So I think the more we are honest and straightforward with the kids and really talk about what is an allergy, what is an intolerance, and you are okay to eat this. You can do that. And so I think that's totally normal, especially with allergies and if a kid maybe has a severe allergy needing an EpiPen, like we have to be very safe around peanuts because Big Brother can't eat peanuts. That's why he has a special pen, but you are okay to eat peanuts when we're not around Big Brother. And so just really having those honest conversations are so important.
Yeah, so true. And I think, parent or kids, they're just always wanting to know they feel safe. So I think
Mhm.
reassurance of you're safe is good, especially in the younger ones. So anything in terms of language as kids get older, because I can imagine, I have little ones right now, but as they get older, I think it probably gets even trickier, right? Because I'm not going to be their only, such a primary influence. And there's so many words that I hear surrounding food that just is not always a good influence.
Yeah. So there's different like stages of childhood. So I would say from birth until about 6 to 8, we're good. Like that's a good time. 6 years old is when we start to lose some of our make-believe abilities. And that's when we start to see possible signs of disordered eating disorder pop up, a sense of control, a sense of like needing to really their life might feel out of control. And so they're going to control other aspects. They might control their toys, they might control their food. And so that might pop up. And then welcome to puberty. It's a hot mess express. That's when the opinions of their peers are more important than your opinions of them. And so that is when, and then that's when all of their hormones change. And so we'll see a huge change in their brains as well. And that's when we see a ginormous spark in eating disorders as well. And then we'll see another spike in them, usually going off to college or when high school is done. And then the last spark we'll see is the blessed menopause.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And what sort of red flag should parents be aware of in terms of spotting someone that's
So with the littles, it's that control. And so if you see kiddos trying to control food, or being secretive about food, so it might be more of a binge eating disorder, hiding things, feeling like it's a shame, or trying to fix things in their family by having an illness. I think that's a big thing. And then in the adolescence, everybody just good luck. Adolescence is hard. It is definitely more of, trying to control the body. A lot of kids are scared of going through puberty. A lot of kids are scared. And sadly, our medical field doesn't always do the best job of talking about the changes. So I heard this the other day, one of the best things I heard, for all you parents that play with Play-Doh with your kids, when you make a Play-Doh snake, you have to make a ball first, and it gets really big and fat, and then you have to roll it out to make a snake. So our kids go through the same thing. So they will get chunky in the middle around their abdominal area before they grow big. You have to grow out before you grow up. And so a lot of times in our medical field, when you're going to those appointments, they might be having a higher BMI. They might be a little bit higher on their growth chart. That is normal. Do not freak out. Do not get worried about that. They will grow. If it continues and it is something worried, see a dietitian, but it is very normal to be a ball before you become a snake. And so I think also sharing that with kids as well is like, oh, we have to have a little bit more energy on our body so that we can grow tall. I'm going to keep rambling, but
I think just more, red flags, like, are there different red flags at different ages, or is it present similarly in a 13-year-old and an 18-year-old?
Oh, goodness. Yes and no.
Okay.
Some 13-year-olds will present as, I am trying to hide my body, and so I'm going to binge and have a protective layer around me. Others are, I don't like who I am. I need to control everything. And so that's going to be something different. And that shows up in all ages. So again, it's not age specific. It's very much that deeper issue. So I always tell parents, it's never about the food. It's about what's underneath the food. And my biggest thing I always tell parents is be curious. When I'm curious, why aren't we eating carbohydrates anymore? Oh, well, in my science class, they said carbs are bad. Cool. Well, tell me more. And so I think not jumping to conclusions, not putting your own stuff out there is really important. Or, oh, I need to go on a diet because I need to lose weight. Why is that? Oh, what's wrong with being overweight? And so asking those questions without having any bias is hard, but I think that's where you'll get more information as well.
And then let's say someone thinks that they're seeing some red flags in their kids. What are the first steps that they should be taking?
Yeah. So if you are seeing some red flags, so the NEDA website, it's the National Eating Disorder Awareness website. There is a quiz you can take from a loved one or a parent, just to kind of am I seeing the things? Is this true? Is it not? Then you can choose to go either which route. You can go to an eating disorder dietitian. And you can find that in the IADEP, International Association of Eating Disorder Professionals website. So you can kind of search in your area. Or you can go a therapist route. So no good, bad, right, wrong. Just know that therapists and dietitians, they have lots of specialties. And so you want to find one that does have the background and education in eating disorders.
Yeah, and as much as, we're both dietitians, but I would just echo that of like, I think it's important to have someone that specializes in this area because dietitians can have a wide range of specialties. So I think finding one that specializes in eating disorders is important. And like you said, there can also be, and sometimes because you worked in years, seeing people one-on-one for eating disorders, a lot of times is it just a dietitian or is there sometimes like this team of people that are working
There's
together?
always a team. So if I'm working with a patient, they also have to see a therapist. And then if necessary, we'll add in a psychiatrist if meds are required, or a primary care physician. But especially with kiddos, we do like a primary care physician so we can track blood work and just making sure that there's nothing else going on, because eating disorders can cause a lot of harm to the body.
So I'm trying to think, you just sparked another question, but I wanted to actually touch on something else because you're talking about the stages, and I know we're talking more about kids, but you said something about menopause being a time where you see this. So what are some things, I mean, just thinking to some of our listeners, what are some things in your friends or maybe like, a sister or something like that that you might see that could be red flags, or how can you handle that if you see that there might be something going on in a loved one?
So interesting enough, the latest statistic I saw was 1 in 5 women at the age of 40 will have had experience with eating disorder or disordered eating at that time.
Wow.
Holy hell, that's a lot of us. And so one of the things is that's a sign as a chronic dieter. They've tried every diet under the sun and they're still trying to lose weight. That's a big red flag. That's probably the biggest. I always say that diets are the number one cause of an eating disorder. So if somebody's been on and off, they've done Weight Watchers or whatever, they're doing something new, hoping for the same results and nothing's working. That's first and foremost. If they're seeing their body maybe hit menopause sooner than expected, like if all the females in their family didn't go through menopause until their late 50s, but they're already like full-blown menopause in their 40s, like what's going on? If they're really having issues with their bone density, but family history is not there. They're struggling a lot more with mental health, like a higher level of anxiety and depression. So those would be the bigger causes I would be curious about for us more mature ladies.
And if someone did have a friend, do you have any conversation starters or a way to broach that? And if you're my friend, I don't know, I don't have anyone in mind.
It's hard. It's touchy. I would again just go in with curiosity of like, I would think like the chronic dieter, because I know so many people have tried every single diet under the sun. It's like, hey, what would it be maybe not to try a diet and talk to a dietitian? Just try something different. I've listened to this crazy podcast, and evidently dietitians aren't sexy, but they are really helpful. So I think being curious is so much easier than judgmental, because we do live in a culture and a society that it's praised to be in a smaller body than it is. And that's the other thing. When we think of an eating disorder, we think of like that image that pops in your brain is somebody that's very, very emaciated, very, very thin. But eating disorders come in all shapes and sizes. And so somebody might be malnourished, meaning they're very, very undernourished, and be in a larger body. It seems very counterintuitive in our brain, but yeah, it's all shapes and sizes.
And then I also want to point out, because I don't know that we've touched on this, but like, it's not just female, right? Like so moms, I'm a boy mom, but I think it's so important to keep in mind that this can pop up in, men as well as women, boys as well as girls.
And there's a lot more shame in boys as well, because it's, and I'm using air quotes, a female issue, is what it's always kind of categorized. And again, it comes back to that control, sense of self. And we see it also in different gender orientations as well. So I think that's a different whole other ball of wax as well. So yeah, eating disorders is like depression. It doesn't pick based off of gender or identity.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this has all been so insightful and so glad to have you on to talk about this topic. It's so important, I think, for people to be aware of and think about. Any other points that you want to make sure to hit home for people that we haven't touched on today?
I would say if it smells funny, trust your gut, especially if you're a mom. Like you know more than you ever think you did. And it's better to get another pair of eyes on your kiddo, loved ones, whoever, than not. So trust your gut. I've had so many parents like, I think this is something. Do you mind just checking out? And I'd rather that be safe than sorry.
I agree. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Let people know how they can find you, connect with you.
Yeah, so you can definitely check us out, usenourish.com, to find out more about seeing a registered dietitian. And yeah, I'm on all the socials, to hanging out, talking about being a boy mom.
Awesome. Well, Adrien, thanks again for having you. It's been a pleasure.
Bye, Allison.
Thank you so much, Adrien, for coming on today's episode to share about such an important topic. A reminder that if you are a longtime listener to the podcast, I always appreciate those ratings and reviews. It just helps more people to find the Meal Prep Monday podcast. And if you are wanting to try out our time-saving meal plans, you can head to prepdish.com/MPM, short for Meal Prep Monday, and give it a try for 2 weeks for free. I challenge you to try it out for 2 weeks and see how it works for you. Again, that's prepdish.com/MPM. That is all I have for this week. I'll be back again next week with another episode.